Population is the main driving factor or a major driving factor behind every single problem that you can mention. Most destructive impact on the environment is both by the very wealthy and the very poor, the ones who are desperately struggling to survive, and in their desperate struggle to survive, they cut down forests for agricultural land and they get erosion. Actually, 80% of deforestation is due to increased agricultural expansion as opposed to large, forestry companies or something like that. Look at the situation in India, where the Green Revolution is in the process of sputtering out. And a lot of that had to do with a massive increase in the population in India and the loss of biodiversity. 100,000 tigers in 1900 versus about 2,000 now. The other comment I'd like to make is on greenhouse gas emissions. China is set to surpass the U.S. in greenhouse gas production. And we know that per capita, China has a much lower level of affluence, but there's 1.2 billion Chinese, so the numbers do matter. Compare Thailand with the Philippines.
Absolutely.
About 30 years ago, they had about the same population and the same rate of growth, and now Thailand has a stable population and is much better off economically, while the Philippines population increased by about 30 million in the last 20 years. And they're having, Thailand exports rice and the Philippines imports rice. It's much easier to get people to cut back on the number of their children than on their consumption. So why don't we focus on making everything available to help people cut back on the number of their children? And as for the point of the article that you mentioned, Steve,
yes,
we have increased our style of living at the expense of what? I mean, we've taken over 1/3 of the land surface. We have depleted the oceans. All of the major fisheries are being fished at or beyond capacity, and in 30 years, at current rates, they'll all collapse, like the cod fishery. We've totally decreased biodiversity. About a quarter of all land animals and plants are going to be threatened with extinction by 2050. 30 years ago, immigrants did much better, but now there's a lot more competition, and the whole idea is, and there have been various studies by the Canadian government itself on immigration, and they concluded that there were no net economic benefits.
Okay, so
we were talking about growth, and I have this article from the Ottawa Citizen, Census 2000. Growth doesn't pay for most Canadians, it says. I'm sure you can't see it on the
No, hold it up a little higher. Just hold it a little higher. There we go. Growth doesn't pay off for most Canadians. Okay.
And what it says is that with all the growth in population, I mean, that's the government's argument, we need to keep the population growing for economic growth. Well, guess what? The vast majority, it didn't change at all. The top quintile, the top 20% got 16% richer, and the bottom 20% got 20% poorer. So basically, what has occurred is there's been a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. We've probably used up half of the oil that's in the ground, and we're willing to destroy the environment to get back at low quality oil that's really hard to get at and everything like that. We have, as I said, we've depleted the fisheries, we've taken over 1/3 of the land on the surface of the earth, and the remaining land is not suitable to agriculture. When we try to convert it to agricultural uses, we just cause deforestation and erosion. Our website has a paper on it that says why Canada needs a population policy. We should assess what our resources are and what an optimum population for Canada should be. There has been no rational discussion around this issue, and it's something that should be in the public domain, and people should not be afraid to address the issue of whether we need more or fewer or
all right, let me follow up